My fiancé looked me in the eye and said, "I didn't tell you because you always kill the vibe," after I caught him cheating. The word vibe felt like a serrated blade. It was such a small, trendy, nothing word to use as a justification for incinerating a 4-year relationship. It made me feel old, even though we're both 32. It made me feel heavy and burdensome, like I was a tax audit he was trying to avoid while he went out and played in the sun. I moved into the studio apartment on a Tuesday. It was 45 minutes away from our old neighborhood, tucked into a part of town that smelled like exhaust and cheap tacos. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's microwave beeping at 6:00 near a.m. every morning. I spent the first week sitting on a folding chair because I couldn't bring myself to go back to the duplex to get the rest of my furniture. Every time I thought about calling a mover, I pictured Jordan and Kayla in that living room, maybe deciding which of my paintings they were going to take down first. I didn't tell my parents right away. My mom loved Jordan. She's the kind of woman who saves newspaper clippings of interest rates and mails them to you, just in case you're looking to refinance. She thought he was stable. She thought he was the safe bet. Telling her felt like admitting I'd bought a lemon of a car and ignored the check engine light for 3 years. The certified letter changed everything. Up until that point, I was just sad. I was grieving a version of him that apparently never existed. But seeing his name on a law firm's letterhead, right next to mine, for a debt I didn't feel I owed, that woke something up in me that wasn't sad at all. The lease break fee was $8,400. Because we were both on the hook, the management company didn't care who paid it, they just wanted the money. Jordan's letter claimed that since I was the one who abandoned the residence without notice, I was responsible for the full penalty. He wasn't just moving Kayla in. He was trying to make me subsidize their new life together. I took the letter to a friend of a friend, a real estate lawyer named Marcus. We met at a coffee shop that was too loud and too crowded. Marcus looked over the document while chewing on a plastic stirrer. "He's aggressive," Marcus said, sliding the paper back to me. "But he's also sloppy. Did you sign a roommate agreement when you moved in? Anything outside the master lease?" "No," I said. "We were getting married. We just shared everything." "Right. That's usually how it goes until it isn't." Marcus pointed to a line at the bottom. "He wants you to sign a quitclaim deed for the duplex. You guys bought that together, right?" "We did." "Well, we put the down payment together. It's a condo-style duplex. We own the unit." Marcus nodded. "If you sign this, you're giving up your equity in the property. He's offering to drop the lawsuit for the lease fee if you just hand over your half of the home's appreciation." "How much has the property value gone up since you bought it?" I did the math in my head. "We bought it 3 years ago before the Austin market went completely nuclear. Probably 200,000, I whispered. Marcus let out a short, dry laugh. "So he wants you to give him a $100,000 gift so he doesn't sue you for $4,000? This guy has a lot of nerve." I felt a cold shiver. It wasn't just about the vibe. Jordan was an auditor. He dealt with numbers for a living. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was betting on me being too heartbroken and too exhausted to look at the math. He thought I'd pay $100,000 just to make the phone stop ringing and the letters stop coming. I didn't sign. I didn't even reply. 2 days later, I got a text from Jordan. It was the first time he'd messaged me since the night I left. "Jordan, I saw you picked up the letter. Don't make this difficult. Kayla is stressed out enough as it is trying to get settled, and your name being on the deed is holding up the refinancing. Just sign it and we can both move on." I stared at the screen until it went dark. Kayla was stressed. The woman who was currently sleeping in my bed, using my shower, and probably feeding my dog was stressed. I didn't reply to the text either. Instead, I drove to the duplex. I didn't go inside. I didn't even get out of the car. I sat at the curb and watched. At 5:30 p.m., Jordan's car pulled into the driveway. He looked the same, cockeyed, buttoned down, slightly rumpled from a day at the office. But then the passenger door opened. Kayla hopped out. She was wearing the Rafa cycling jacket, the extra small one, the one I'd seen on the Amazon history. She looked young, vibrant, and completely at home. She said something that made Jordan laugh, a real, genuine belly laugh I hadn't heard from him in over a year. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It was a gesture he used to do for me. It was so casual, so practiced, that it made my stomach turn. They walked up the steps together, his hand on the small of her back. As the front door closed, I noticed something on the porch. My favorite ceramic planter, the one my grandmother gave me, was sitting by the trash can. It was cracked down the side, and the fern inside was brown and shriveled. I put the car in gear and drove away, but I didn't go back to my studio. I went to Brandon's house. Jordan's brother lived in a small bungalow in Hyde Park. When he opened the door, he looked like he'd aged 5 years since the rainy day in his truck. He didn't even ask why I was there. He just stepped aside and let me in. "He's being an idiot," Brandon said, handing me a glass of water. I told him he's crossing a line with the legal stuff. "He wants the equity, Brandon," I said. "He's trying to steal my half of the house." Brandon rubbed his face with his hands. "He thinks he's entitled to it because he's the one maintaining it now. He's convinced himself that you leaving was a breach of contract or something. He's got this whole narrative in his head where you're the villain for abandoning the relationship when it got hard. When it got hard, he was cheating for months." "I know," Brandon sighed. "But Kayla, she's got him in this bubble. Everything is about positive energy and alignment. It sounds like a cult, honestly. They spend all their time with those cycling people. It's like he's deleted the last 4 years of his life." I looked at Brandon. "I need to know one thing. Did he use our shared savings for that cabin trip?" Brandon hesitated. He looked at the floor, then back at me. "I shouldn't tell you this. It's going to make it worse. It's already at the bottom, Brandon. There is no worse." "He didn't just use the savings," Brandon whispered. "He took out a personal loan. He's in over his head, Jen. The bike, the gear, the trips. He's trying to keep up with Kayla's lifestyle. Her family has money, and she doesn't understand that an auditor's salary has limits. He's drowning, and he thinks the equity in the duplex is his life raft." I sat back in the chair. The picture was getting clearer. This wasn't just a midlife crisis or a vibe shift. This was a financial collapse disguised as a romance. He wasn't just trying to get rid of me. He was trying to liquidate me. "Is the dog okay?" I asked quietly. quietly. Brody? Brandon's expression softened. He's okay. He spends a lot of time in the crate, though. Kayla isn't really a dog person. She thinks he's too chaotic for the house. That was the moment. The sadness, the betrayal, the legal threats. I could have swallowed all of that eventually. But hearing that my dog, my sweet 80-pound golden retriever who lived for belly rubs and tennis balls, was being treated like an inconvenience, that was the end of my patience. I stood up. Thanks for the water, Brandon. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to Marcus again, I said. And then I'm going to go get my dog. The next morning, I sent a formal response to the law firm. I didn't use a lawyer's template. I wrote it myself and had Marcus polish the edges. I told them that I would not be signing the quitclaim deed. Furthermore, I was filing a partition lawsuit to force the sale of the property. If Jordan wanted to live there with Kayla, he would have to buy out my half at the current market rate, cash. No discounts, no favors, no vibe adjustments. The reaction was instantaneous. My phone exploded with calls from Jordan. When I didn't answer, he started leaving voicemails. The first one was angry. The second one was pleading. By the third one, he sounded desperate. Jen, you can't do this. His voice crackled through the speaker. A forced sale will take months. We're in the middle of a refi. If the bank sees a pending lawsuit, they'll pull the loan. You're going to ruin everything. Just be reasonable for once. Reasonable. I wondered if he felt reasonable when he was buying $200 jackets for another woman with our grocery money. I spent the afternoon at a park near my new apartment, watching other people play with their dogs. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. I had a plan for the house, but I didn't have a plan for Brody. The lease on my studio strictly forbade pets over 20 pounds. I was sitting on a bench when a text came through from an unknown number. Unknown. Hi, Jennifer. It's Kayla. I think we should talk. Woman to woman. This legal stuff is getting really ugly and it's hurting Jordan's mental health. Can we meet for tea tomorrow? Just us. I stared at the woman to woman part until the words lost all meaning. The audacity was almost impressive. She wanted to talk about his mental health after she helped him dismantle my entire life. I typed back. Name the place. She chose a high-end wellness cafe in West Lake, the kind of place where a smoothie costs $18 and the chairs are made of recycled driftwood. When I walked in, she was already there, looking perfectly curated in a Lululemon set and a delicate gold necklace. She stood up to hug me, but I stepped back and sat down before she could make contact. I'm glad you came, she said, her voice soft and airy. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like a girl who had never been told no in her entire life. Jordan is just, he's so stressed, Jennifer. He's not sleeping. He feels like you're attacking him. I'm protecting my assets, Kayla, I said. There's a difference. But it's just money, she said, leaning forward. Is money really worth all this negative energy? You guys had your time and it was beautiful, but it's over. Why can't we just let it go with grace? Grace is expensive, I told her. The equity in that house is my retirement. It's my future. I put every cent I had into that down payment while Jordan was still paying off his grad school loans. I'm not letting it go, so you can have a nice backyard for your cycling parties. Kayla's smile flickered. Just for a second, the mask slipped. Jordan told me you were difficult. He said you were always focused on the material side of things instead of the connection. Jordan tells a lot of stories, I said. Did he tell you he's broke? Did he tell you about the personal loan he took out to pay for your hill country weekend? She went still. Her hand, which had been resting on her matcha latte, began to tremble slightly. He said that was a bonus from work. He's an auditor, Kayla. They don't get $10,000 weekend bonuses in the spring. Check the bank statements. Oh wait, you can't, because he probably hasn't shown you the accounts yet. She took a slow sip of her drink, trying to regain her composure. Regardless of his finances, the house is our home now. We're building something. You're just a ghost in the guest room at this point. It's pathetic, honestly. I might be a ghost, I said, leaning in, but I'm a ghost who owns 50% of your floorboards, and I'm filing the partition tomorrow. Unless what? She snapped. Unless you give me the dog. Right now. Today. Kayla blinked. She looked genuinely confused. The dog? You want the hairy, loud animal that sheds on the rug? Jordan said he was our dog, but honestly, he's a nightmare. He doesn't fit the aesthetic of the house at all. He's not an aesthetic, Kayla. He's a living creature. You give me Brody, and I'll give my lawyer a call to discuss a settlement on the house. I won't walk away for nothing, but I'll stop the forced sale. She didn't even hesitate. Fine, take him. Jordan will be annoyed, but he'll get over it. He's more worried about the refinancing anyway. I felt a wave of relief so strong I thought I might cry, but I held it together. I didn't want her to see me break. I'll be at the house in an hour. Have his things on the porch. I'm not coming inside. Done, she said, already reaching for her phone, probably to text Jordan a version of the story where she negotiated a brilliant deal. I drove to the duplex with my heart hammering against my ribs. I was breaking my lease rules. I had no idea where I was going to keep a golden retriever in a 400 square foot studio, but I didn't care. I'd sleep in my car if I had to. When I pulled up, the porch was cluttered. 2 bags of kibble, a frayed leash, and a stack of dog bowls were piled next to the door. And there was Brody. He was tied to the railing, sitting quietly, looking at the street with that hopeful, heartbreaking expression dogs get when they think they're going for a walk. When he saw my car, his tail started to thump against the wood. Then he stood up and let out a single sharp bark. I scrambled out of the car and ran up the steps. I didn't even look at the windows to see if Jordan or Kayla were watching. I just unclipped the leash and buried my face in his neck. He smelled like the house, lavender candles and stale air, but he was warm and he was mine. Let's go, buddy, I whispered. I loaded him into the back seat. As I was closing the door, the front door of the duplex opened. Jordan stepped out. He wasn't wearing his cycling gear. He was in his work clothes, but he looked disheveled. His tie was loose and his face was flushed. Jen, he called out. I paused, my hand on the door handle. Kayla told me about your little deal, he said, walking to the edge of the porch. He didn't come down the stairs. He stayed on his high ground. You think you're so smart, don't you? Using a dog to leverage a financial settlement? I didn't leverage anything, Jordan, I said. I gave her a choice. She chose the house. You chose the vibe. I'm the only one who chose the dog. We're still going to court if you don't sign that deed by Friday. he shouted as I got into the driver's seat. I'm not paying you $100,000 for doing nothing. I didn't do nothing, I said, looking at him through the open window. I lived with you for 4 years. I paid half the mortgage, and I kept your secrets, but I'm done with all of that now. I drove away, watching him shrink in the rearview mirror. Brody put his head on my shoulder, panting happily into my ear. I spent the next 3 days in a state of high-functioning panic. I found a friend who agreed to watch Brody for a week, but I knew I needed a permanent solution, and I knew Jordan wasn't going to let the house go easily. On Friday morning, Marcus called me. Heard from Jordan's lawyer, Marcus said. His voice sounded different, tighter. They're not settling. In fact, they've filed a counterclaim. Jordan is alleging that you took unspecified valuables from the home when you moved out, and he's using that to offset your equity claim. Valuables? I asked. I took 3 suitcases of clothes and my laptop. I left the furniture, the kitchenware, everything. He's claiming you took a collection of vintage watches and some high-end cycling equipment that belonged to him, Marcus said. He's got receipts for the items, and he's claiming the total value is close to $40,000. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The room felt like it was spinning. I didn't take any watches. I don't even know where he kept them. And the cycling gear? Why would I take men's cycling gear? It doesn't matter if it makes sense, Marcus said. It matters if he can make a judge believe it. He's trying to mud up the waters, Jen. He's trying to make you look like a vindictive ex who robbed him blind so he doesn't have to pay you your share of the house. He's lying, Marcus. He's auditing his own life and he's cooking the books. I believe you, Marcus said, but we have a problem. Kayla's father? He's a partner at a big firm downtown. He just assigned one of his associates to help Jordan pro bono. They have more resources than we do. They can drag this out for years. I looked over at the corner of my studio where Brody's empty water bowl sat. I had rescued the dog, but Jordan was still holding my entire financial future hostage. And now he was calling me a thief. I thought about that mezcal smell on his breath the night he lied about the broken chain. I thought about the vibe. Marcus, I said, my voice shaking. If he's claiming I took those things, does that mean he's reported them stolen to his insurance company? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. If he's smart, he hasn't yet, Marcus said. Because if he does, and it turns out they aren't stolen, that's insurance fraud. But if he wants to use it in the partition suit, he'll have to produce a police report. He's going to do it, I said. He's desperate. He's drowning in debt, and he thinks this is his way out. Then we need to find those watches, Marcus said. Because if they're still in that house, and he files a report saying they're gone, the vibe is going to get a lot more complicated. I hung up the phone and looked at my keys. I still had my copy. I hadn't given it back yet, and Jordan hadn't changed the locks, probably because he was too busy with his mental health and his cycling trips. I knew it was a risk. I knew it was probably a bad idea, but I also knew Jordan. He was meticulous about his work, but he was incredibly lazy about his home life. If those watches existed, and if he was lying about me taking them, they were still in that duplex. I waited until I knew they would be out on their Saturday morning ride. The Barton Creek rouleurs always met at 7 a.m. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. My heart was thumping so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I went to the side gate, the one that led to the small patio. The lock clicked open with a familiar weight. The house smelled like her now. Too much eucalyptus and expensive cleaning products. I moved through the living room like a burglar in my own home. I went straight to the bedroom. The bed was made perfectly, with decorative pillows I'd never seen before. I checked the top drawer of Jordan's dresser. Nothing but socks and ties. I checked the closet. His suits were lined up, but there was a new section of spandex, bright neon cycling jerseys, that cost more than my monthly rent. I was about to give up when I saw it. A small floor bolt safe in the back of the closet. It was open. I knelt down and looked inside. There were no vintage watches. There was no high-end gear. There was only a stack of past due notices, a final warning from the bank regarding the mortgage, and a folder labeled refinance dented. Jordan hadn't just been lying to me. He'd been lying to Kayla too. He didn't want the equity to build a life with her. He needed the equity because he was weeks away from losing the house entirely. I pulled out my phone to take a picture of the documents. That's when I heard the garage door groan open. They were home early. The heavy thud of the garage door was a physical blow to my chest. My hands shook as I shoved the refinance dented folder back into the safe. I didn't have time to organize it perfectly. I didn't have time to think. I just pushed the safe door shut, not clicking it, hoping they wouldn't notice, and scrambled into the guest bedroom across the hall. I pressed myself against the wall behind the door, my breath coming in jagged, silent hitches. Through the crack in the hinge, I saw the master bedroom door swing open. I'm telling you, it's the humidity. Kayla's voice drifted in, sharp and irritated. She wasn't using that soft wellness guru tone now. My gears were slipping the whole way back. If I'm going to ride in this heat, I need the bike serviced properly. And I'm not taking it to that shop on the east side again. I'll handle it, Kay, Jordan said. He sounded exhausted. Not the good kind of exhausted he used to bring home from the trails. This was the sound of a man who was running out of track. I just need to sit down for a second. My head is pounding. Maybe because you spent all night looking at spreadsheets again, she snapped. I heard the wet thwack of her throwing her sweat-soaked jersey onto the floor. You said the house stuff was sorted. You said Jennifer was being handled. So why are you still acting like the world is ending? Because the bank is being difficult, okay? It's just red tape. Standard auditor stuff. You wouldn't understand the back end of it. I understand that I moved in here on the promise that we were starting fresh, not living in the shadow of your ex's legal threats. I heard the bed creak as one of them sat down. I looked at the photos on my phone, the blurry, panicked shots of Jordan's financial ruin. They were my leverage, but standing 3 feet away from them, they felt like a death sentence. If they found me here, Jordan wouldn't just be angry. He was already cornered. A cornered auditor with a reputation to lose is a dangerous person to have a conversation with in a hallway. I waited. My legs started to cramp from the tension. I heard the shower start in the master bath, the heavy spray of the rainfall head I had picked out 2 years ago. That was my opening. I slipped out of the guest room. My socks rock silent on the hardwood. I didn't look back. I moved through the kitchen, past the bowl of expensive organic lemons that were clearly just for show, and out the side door. I didn't stop running until I reached my car 2 blocks away. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors, my forehead resting on the steering wheel. I felt sick, not because I'd been caught, but because of what I'd seen. Jordan wasn't just a cheater, he was a fraud. He was living in a house he couldn't afford, with a woman he was lying to, using a life he'd stolen from our shared future to keep the whole thing upright. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Brandon. Brandon, hey, check your email. Jordan just sent something to the whole family. It's bad, Jen. I opened my laptop, tethering it to my phone with trembling fingers. The email was a blind copy to his parents, my parents, and Brandon. The subject line: a difficult disclosure. In the email, Jordan played the martyr. He claimed that he had tried to keep our private struggles quiet out of respect for me, but that he could no longer stay silent. He accused me of a long-term struggle with prescription pill dependency that had drained our savings. He claimed that his infidelity was actually a cry for help because he felt like a caretaker instead of a partner. He even suggested that I had staged the finding the jacket incident to extort him during the breakup. He ended the email by saying he was praying for my recovery, but that he had to protect his home and his new partner from my erratic and predatory legal maneuvers. I stared at the screen. My mom was already calling. I ignored it. He wasn't just trying to win the house. He was poisoning the well. He knew that if he destroyed my credibility with our families, anything I said about his finances or his lies would look like the ramblings of an addict seeking revenge. I called Marcus. He went nuclear, I said, my voice flat. I saw the email, Marcus said. He sounded grim. Your mom called my office 10 minutes ago crying. Jen, this changes the optics. If we go to court for the partition now, his lawyers are going to bring up these substance abuse allegations to argue that you aren't a reliable witness or that you squandered the marital assets before the split. It's a lie, Marcus. Every word of it. I have my medical records. I have bank statements. Statements that show what, Jen? You told me yourself he handled the big accounts. If he's been moving money around for months, making small cash withdrawals or transfers that look suspicious, he can build a paper trail that supports his story. An auditor knows how to make a lie look like a ledger. I have photos, I whispered. I went into the house. I saw his safe. There was a long silence on the line. You did what? Marcus's tone was sharp. Jennifer, tell me you didn't break in. I have a key. I'm still on the deed. It doesn't matter. If they find out you were in there while they were home, they can file for a restraining order. That's exactly what he wants. He wants you legally barred from the property so he can finish the refinance without you breathing down his neck. He can't finish the refinance, I said, feeling a cold surge of clarity. I saw the letter, Marcus. The bank already denied him. He's underwater. He's trying to discredit me, so I'll settle for nothing just to make the rumors stop. He needs my half of the equity to pay off the personal loans he took out to impress Kayla. If that's true, he's desperate. And desperate people don't stop at emails. I looked at the denied photo on my phone. It was grainy, but the bank's logo was clear. The date was from last Tuesday. What do we do? I asked. We don't respond to the email, Marcus said. We don't defend. We don't explain. If you start defending yourself against a lie, you're letting him set the terms of the fight. Instead, we're gonna look at the one thing an auditor can't fake: the source of the funds. What do you mean? He said you drained the savings. We need to find out where that money actually went. If it went to bike shops, Westlake rentals, and mezcal bars, his addiction narrative falls apart. But Jen, you need to stay away from that house. If he catches you there again, I can't help you. I stayed with Brody at my friend's place that night. I couldn't go back to my studio. I felt like Jordan was everywhere. In the glowing screen of my phone, in the whispers of my mother's voicemails, in the quiet way my friends were suddenly checking in on me. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Not a call. A notification from our shared Amazon account. Jordan hadn't changed the password. I logged in, my heart racing. I went to the archived orders section, the place where people hide things they don't want their spouses to see. There were dozens of them. High-end security cameras, motion sensors, a digital door lock with a keypad, all ordered 2 days ago, all delivered to the duplex. He wasn't just trying to keep me out legally. He was turning the house into a fortress. But there was something else in the archive, something that made my blood go cold. A purchase for a professional-grade audio recording device, disguised as a USB power bank. I thought about the kitchen, the organic lemons, the place where I used to sit and talk to Brandon on the phone about my plans. He wasn't just lying about me. He was listening to me. The USB recording device was buried 3 pages deep in the order history, tucked between a pack of high-end dish soap and a bulk bag of electrolyte powder. I sat in the dark of my friend's guest room, the blue light of the laptop screen stinging my eyes. I didn't just feel sick. I felt foolish. I had been worried about him listening metaphorically, but the reality was much more literal. Jordan was an auditor. He didn't guess. He gathered data. I spent the next hour scrolling through the history, my fingers shaking on the trackpad. He'd bought a Wi-Fi range extender 2 months ago. He'd bought a smart lock with a guest access log. He was building a digital map of my movements before I even knew I was moving out. The vibe he was so desperate to protect was actually a perimeter. I shut the laptop and stared at the ceiling. I had the photos of the denied refinance. I had the proof of his spending, but he had the narrative. In Austin, social capital is its own kind of currency, and Jordan was currently spending mine to save himself. Saturday morning, my phone started buzzing at 8 a.m. It was a group text from our old neighborhood association. So sorry to hear about your health struggles, Jen. We're all rooting for you. Jordan mentioned you might need some space, but we're here if you need a meal train or a ride to a meeting. I didn't respond. I couldn't. How do you tell 30 neighbors that you aren't an addict? You're just a woman who caught her fiancé buying Rafa jackets for a woman half her size. If I denied it, I looked like I was in denial. If I ignored it, I looked guilty. It was a perfect claustrophobic trap. I went to pick up Brody from my friend's house. He was waiting by the door, his tail wagging so hard his entire back half wiggled. I loaded him into my car and drove toward the only place I felt I could breathe. The Greenbelt. We hiked for 2 hours. I watched him splash in the creek, oblivious to the fact that his dad had tried to trade him for a lower interest rate. When I got back to the car, there was a sticky note on my windshield. Call me, now. Brandon? I called him before I even pulled out of the parking lot. Jen. Stay away from the duplex, Brandon said, his voice low and rushed. Jordan called the cops this morning. He reported a suspicious person on his security cameras from yesterday. He didn't name you, not yet, but he's telling everyone he thinks an unstable acquaintance is stalking the property. I was there for 5 minutes, Brandon. I have a key. He changed the code on the smart lock yesterday afternoon. And Jen, he's telling my parents he found paraphernalia in the guest room after you left yesterday. He's trying to get an emergency injunction to keep you away from the house entirely. If he gets that, you can't force a sale. The court will freeze everything until a fitness evaluation is done. He's planting things? I felt the air leave my lungs. He's actually planting evidence in our home. He's desperate, Brandon said. He's about 10 days away from a foreclosure notice. I saw his mail when I stopped by to grab some of my tools. He's not just underwater. He's at the bottom of the lake. He thinks if he can paint you as a liability, he can convince a judge to give him sole control of the property assets to protect the value of the estate. Where is Kayla in all this? She's one encouraging it. She thinks she's helping him cleanse his life of toxic energy. She doesn't realize she's just helping him commit fraud. Or maybe she does and she just doesn't care as long as the vibe stays curated. I hung up and looked at Brody in the rearview mirror. Jordan wanted a fight. He wanted to use my name, my reputation, and my sanity as collateral for his ego. I didn't go to my lawyer. I didn't go to the police. Instead, I drove to a small, nondescript office building off Mopac. It was the headquarters of the firm Jordan worked for. I knew the receptionist, Sarah. We'd grabbed drinks at the office Christmas party for 3 years straight. I walked in at 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't crying. I wasn't erratic. I was wearing a blazer I'd pulled from my suitcase and a pair of heels that made me feel 6 feet tall. Jen. Oh my God, I heard, Sarah started, her eyes wide with that pitying look that had become my shadow. You heard a story, Sarah, I said, leaning on the mahogany desk. I'm not here for Jordan. I'm here because I think there's been a mistake on some shared accounts. Jordan mentioned he was doing some pro bono auditing for a cycling nonprofit called the Barton Creek Rulers. I just wanted to make sure the firm's insurance covers his outside consulting. Sarah frowned. Jordan doesn't do outside consulting. It's against his contract. All his billable hours are strictly internal. That's strange, I said, sliding a printout of our shared bank statement across the desk. Because there are 6 transfers here, totaling $15,000 from his work expense reimbursement account into a private PayPal linked to a K. Sterling. I assumed it was for the nonprofit. Sarah's face went white. She knew the name. Kayla Sterling wasn't just a cyclist. Her father was one of the firm's biggest clients. I should probably go, I said, picking up my bag. I wouldn't want to get him in trouble if it's just a misunderstanding of the vibe. I walked out of the building and sat in my car. My heart was thumping a rhythm I didn't recognize. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the cold, hard satisfaction of a ledger finally balancing out. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It wasn't Jordan. It was a number I didn't recognize. Jennifer? This is Arthur Sterling, Kayla's father. The man Jordan was counting on to save him. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice steady. I imagine you have some questions about your daughter's new boyfriend. I have a great many questions, Jennifer. And I think it would be in everyone's best interest if we had a very quiet, very thorough conversation before the bank opens tomorrow morning. The vibe was officially dead, and I was just getting started. Meeting Arthur Sterling was like walking into a freezer. He didn't invite me to his house in Westlake Hills. He told me to meet him at a 24-hour diner on Congress at 5:30 a.m. He was sitting in a corner booth, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, staring at a cup of black coffee like it was a witness he was about to cross-examine. I've spent 30 years building a reputation, Jennifer, he said, before I even slid into the vinyl seat. And I've spent 24 years trying to make sure my daughter never has to feel the grit of the real world. You've managed to complicate both of those things in one afternoon. I didn't apologize. I put my phone on the table. Jordan isn't the man you think he is, Mr. Sterling. And he's certainly not the man Kayla thinks he is. He's using your daughter's social standing to mask a total financial collapse. And if those PayPal transfers are what I think they are, reimbursed company funds being funneled to your daughter, it's not just a messy breakup, it's embezzlement. And her name is on the receiving end. Arthur didn't flinch. He just signaled the waitress for another coffee. Jordan told us you were unwell. He said, you'd been stealing from the joint accounts to fund a lifestyle he couldn't talk about. He made it sound like he was the one holding the line. I have the login history for the Amazon account, I said, my voice low and sharp. I have the receipts for the equipment he bought to spy on me. I have the bank's rejection letter for the refinance. He's underwater by $300,000, Mr. Sterling. He's not holding the line. He's looking for someone to drown with him. We sat there for an hour. I showed him everything. I showed him the timeline of the cycling safety clinics that were actually cabin rentals. I showed him the Rafa jacket receipt. But most importantly, I showed him the credit card statements where Jordan had been paying for Kayla's theory of nutritional fasting subscriptions using our shared emergency fund. Arthur watched it all with a terrifying silent intensity. When I was done, he checked his watch. I'm going to handle this, Jennifer, but I need you to understand something. If you go to the police, or if you make this public, my daughter's name gets dragged through the mud with his. I won't allow that. I don't want to go to the police, I said. I want my equity. I want my name off that deed. And I want Jordan to stop telling people I'm an addict. Go home, Arthur said. Don't answer your phone. Don't go to the house. I'll call you by noon. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I drove to a park and sat in the grass with Brody, watching the sun come up over the Austin skyline. I felt light, but it was a hollow kind of light, like I was a shell that had been scrubbed clean. At 11:15 a.m., my phone rang. It was Brandon. Jen, what did you do? He whispered. He sounded like he was hiding in a closet. Jordan just got a call from the firm. He's been suspended pending doing an internal audit. And Kayla is packing her things. Her dad sent 2 guys in a moving truck. They're literally clearing her out while Jordan stands in the kitchen screaming. Is he okay? I asked. I didn't mean it out of concern. I meant it out of a need to know the threat level. He's losing his mind. He's calling you every 3 seconds. He thinks you told Arthur he was hitting her or something. He's convinced himself this is a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy, Brandon. It's just the truth catching up to him. Stay away, Jen. He's headed to your apartment. I heard him grab his keys. He said he's going to make you tell the truth to Arthur. I hung up. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was cold. I looked at Brody, who was chewing on a stick, completely content. Jordan didn't have my new address, or so I thought. But then I remembered the guest access log on the smart lock. He'd seen me leave the studio. He'd probably followed me at least once to make sure he knew where his liability was sleeping. I loaded Brody into the car and headed to my studio, but I didn't go inside. I parked across the street, behind a row of overgrown oleanders. 10 minutes later, Jordan's black SUV swerved around the corner. He didn't just park, he slammed the curb. He jumped out of the car, still in his cycling shorts and a t-shirt, looking frantic. He ran to the door of my building and started buzzing my unit, over and over. A frantic, rhythmic hum that I could hear even from across the street. When I didn't answer, he started screaming. Jennifer, open the door! You're ruining everything! You think you're so smart? You're a liar. You're a pathetic, jealous liar. A few windows in the building slid open. Neighbors started looking out. This was the vibe he had been so worried about. This was the man who had accused me of being erratic. He looked like a heart attack in spandex. He finally stopped buzzing and leaned his forehead against the brick wall. He stayed like that for a long time. I watched him through the windshield, my hand gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I expected to feel a surge of triumph. I expected to feel like the scales had finally tipped, but all I felt was a profound, exhausted disgust. This was the man I had planned a life with. This was the person I had trusted with my grocery money and my dog. He eventually slumped back to his car, but he didn't drive away. He sat in the driver's seat, staring at my window. He was waiting. My phone buzzed. It was an email from a new address. No subject. I know you're watching, Jen. I know you're close. If I go down for those transfers, I'm telling them you authorized them. I'm telling them it was your idea to skim from the firm to pay for the wedding. I have the emails, or I will have them by the time the auditors get through my laptop. Don't play chicken with an auditor. I know where the bodies are buried because I'm the one who dug the holes. He wasn't just losing his mind. He was pivoting. He was going to forge evidence. He was going to turn a financial disaster into a criminal case, and he was going to drag me into the center of it. I looked at Brody. I looked at the man in the SUV across the street. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to my apartment. I was going back to the one person Jordan was actually afraid of. I drove straight to the Sterling estate. I didn't call. I didn't wait. I pulled up to the gate and buzzed until the intercom clicked. It's Jennifer, I said. Tell Arthur he needs to look at Jordan's wedding folder on his hard drive before Jordan deletes the real one and replaces it with the one he's making right now. The gate hummed open. Arthur was standing on the front porch, looking down at his phone. He looked up as I pulled into the circular gravel drive. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked weary. He's at my apartment, I said, jumping out of the car. He's threatening to frame me for the embezzlement. He says he has emails. Arthur sighed, a long, heavy sound that seemed to age him a decade. He's a small man, Jennifer. Small men always reach for the biggest weapon they can find when they're scared. But Jordan forgot one thing. What's that? I own the firm, Arthur said. And I've had a mirror of his hard drive since 9 a.m. this morning. He's not forging anything. He's just creating a second trail of evidence for the police to follow. The police? I asked. I thought you didn't want them involved. I didn't, Arthur said, walking toward my car. But then I talked to my daughter. Do you know what he told her when she asked about the PayPal transfers? He told her they were hush money. He was paying you to keep you from telling her parents about his affair. He tried to make her feel like she was the one being protected. Arthur leaned against my car door. Kayla might be sheltered, but she's not stupid. She realized that if he was lying to her about you, he was lying to her about everything. She's at her mother's house now. And Jordan is about to find out that Austin is a very small town when you've burned every bridge in it. What about the house? I asked. What about the deed? The bank is moving forward with the foreclosure, Arthur said. But I have a friend at the mortgage company. We're going to buy them some time. You're going to get your equity, Jennifer. Not because Jordan wants to give it to you, but because I'm going to make sure he doesn't have a choice. It's the cost of doing business with my family. I should have felt relieved. But as I drove away from the Sterling mansion, I realized the nightmare wasn't over. Jordan still had my keys. He still had my social security number. And he still had that recording device hidden in my kitchen. When I finally got back to my studio, the black SUV was gone. But there was something sitting on my doorstep. It was a small manila envelope, no return address. Inside was a single printed photo. It was a shot of me and Brandon, sitting in his truck on that rainy day outside the bakery. It had been taken from a distance, through a long lens. On the back, in Jordan's neat, auditor's handwriting, were 4 words. Who's the stranger now? The ink was fresh, but the photo was old. Or at least it felt old. A relic from a day when I thought I was the one in control of the narrative. Seeing that image of me and Brandon in the truck wasn't just a threat. It was a map of how long Jordan had been curated his counterattack. He had been sitting on that photo for weeks, waiting for the moment I felt safest to drop it like a grenade. I didn't call Brandon. I didn't call Arthur. I walked into my studio, locked the door, and pushed my small dresser in front of it. It was a useless, symbolic gesture, but I needed to feel like there was more than just a deadbolt between me and a man who could turn a supportive brother-in-law into a clandestine lover with one well-timed lie to a judge. I sat on the floor with the photo. Brandon had been crying that day. I had been staring at the steering wheel. From the angle of the shot, taken from the bushes across the street from the bakery, it looked like we were leaning into each other. It looked intimate. It looked like a secret. My phone vibrated. It was a notification from a neighborhood social media app. A post from a name I didn't recognize, but the content was unmistakable. unmistakable. Has anyone else noticed the white SUV parked near the park lately? My neighbor said she saw a woman who used to live on the east side acting really erratic near the duplex yesterday. Just want to keep our community safe. There have been reports of some domestic instability. He was crowdsourcing my breakdown. He was using the bored, hyper-vigilant energy of suburban Austin to build a digital fence around himself. If I showed up at the house now to get the rest of my things, I wasn't just an ex-fiancé. I was a suspicious person being tracked by a dozen Ring cameras. I spent the next 3 hours going through my own digital footprint. I needed to see what he saw. I found an old shared Google Calendar we used to use for dog vet appointments and dinner plans. Jordan had stopped adding to it in February, but I noticed a recurring private event every Tuesday at 11 a.m. that I'd never seen before. It was just a string of numbers, 10.4.0.1. I'm not a tech person, but I work in insurance. I know what an IP address looks like. I typed the numbers into my browser. A login screen popped up. Netgear admin. I tried password, nothing. Then I tried the name of our golden retriever and the year we got him. Brody 2021. The screen flickered and opened into the back end of our home router. Jordan hadn't just been using the internet. He'd been monitoring every device that connected to it. There was a log of every time my phone had joined the network, every website I'd visited while sitting on our couch, every FaceTime call I'd made to my mother. But there was something else. A device labeled KitchenAux. It had been uploading massive amounts of data, gigabytes, to a cloud server every night at 3 a.m. The audio recorder wasn't just a passive device. It was a live feed. I looked at the date the device first appeared on the network, March 12th, 3 days after he bought the Trek bike. He hadn't started spying on me because he was afraid I'd catch him. He started spying on me so he could stay one step ahead of the catch. He knew exactly when I started getting suspicious because he heard me talking to myself while I made coffee. He knew I'd found the Rafa jacket receipt because he probably heard the laptop lid slam and the way my breathing changed. The vibe wasn't a feeling. It was a data point. I felt a sudden, sharp urge to vomit. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. I looked tired. I looked like the version of me he was telling everyone existed. I needed to talk to Brandon, but I couldn't do it over the phone. If Jordan was this deep into the tech, he'd probably cloned my SIM or installed a ghost app when I left my phone on the charger back in May. I drove to the Barton Creek Mall. It was loud, crowded, and anonymous. I bought a cheap burner phone from a kiosk, paying in cash. Then I drove to a library, used a public computer to find Brandon's work schedule, and waited in the parking lot of his office building. When he walked out at 5 p.m., he looked like a ghost. He was thinner, his eyes darting toward every car that passed. I honked twice and waved him over. He hesitated, then climbed into the passenger seat. He didn't say hello. He sent the photo to my wife, Jen, Brandon said, staring straight ahead at the dashboard. He sent it with a note saying he felt sorry for her and that he couldn't live with the guilt of knowing his own brother was taking advantage of a vulnerable woman like you. Brandon, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was there. It doesn't matter if he was there. It's the fact that he's willing to burn my marriage to the ground just to make sure no one believes a word you say. My wife, she's not stupid, but she's hurt. She's wondering why I was sitting in a truck with you for an hour without telling her. She's wondering if the off-grid trip Jordan took wasn't the only lie in the family. We have to go to the firm, Brandon. We have to show them the router logs. The firm? Brandon let out a hollow laugh. Jen, Jordan resigned this morning. Before the audit could even start, he cleaned out his desk and disappeared. Arthur Sterling is furious, but Jordan walked away with his personal laptop and his encrypted drives. There's no paper trail left at the office. Where is he? He's at the house. He's barricaded in. He's telling the neighbors that he's securing the perimeter because you've been threatening him. He's even got a private security guard sitting in the driveway. A guy in a polo shirt with a clipboard. It looks official enough that no one is questioning it. I leaned back in the seat. He's not securing the perimeter, Brandon. He's cleaning the crime scene. He's getting rid of the recording devices and the physical evidence of the money he moved. There's something else, Brandon said, finally looking at me. He called my dad. He told him that the reason the house is in foreclosure isn't because of the bike or the trips. He told him that you took out a second mortgage using a forged power of attorney while he was at work. That's impossible. You can't just forge a POA for a home equity line. In Texas, with a mobile notary and a scanned signature, it's harder than it used to be. But for an auditor who knows exactly what the documents are supposed to look like, it's a paperwork exercise. He's not trying to win a court case, Jen. He's trying to delay everything long enough to let the house go to the bank. If the house forecloses, the equity disappears. The debt gets messy. And he walks away with the cash he already skimmed, leaving you with a ruined credit score and a stack of forgery allegations. I looked at the burner phone in my lap. I had the photo of the denied refinance, but that was just a piece of paper. I needed the actual documents. I needed the KitchenAux device. I'm going in, I said. You're insane. There's a guard. There are cameras. He'll have you arrested the second you step on the grass. He's an auditor, Brandon. He works in blocks of time. He has a routine. Every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., he goes to that cycling meetup at the brewery. He won't miss it. Not now. He needs to maintain the vibe more than ever. He needs those people to see him as the guy who's holding it together while his crazy ex loses it. And the guard? The guard is a guy in a polo shirt. He's a deterrent, not a soldier. I'm going through the back fence, through the neighbor's yard. The miller's dog knows me. They're in Colorado for the summer. Jen, if you get caught, this is over. You'll be exactly what he says you are. I'm already exactly what he says I am in everyone's eyes, Brandon. I have nothing left to lose but the truth. I waited until Wednesday evening. The air was heavy with the scent of impending rain and grilled meat from the neighbor's barbecue. I parked 3 blocks away, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. I felt like a cliche, a character in a movie I'd never want to watch. I slipped through the miller's gate. Their yard was overgrown, the grass hip-high and dry. I reached the cedar fence that separated our properties. I knew there was a loose slat near the bottom, where Brody used to try and dig his way out. I pushed it aside aside and crawled through. The backyard was silent. The string lights I'd hung for our third anniversary were dark, one of them dangling by a wire and hitting the siding with a rhythmic tap, tap, tap. I moved toward the kitchen window. I didn't have my key. I knew the code would be changed, but I knew about the window over the sink. The latch had been broken since we moved in. Jordan always said he'd fix it, but he never did. He liked to say that security is a mindset, not a hardware issue. I stood myself up, my muscles screaming. I slid the window open and tumbled into the sink, knocking over a bottle of expensive soap. The house smelled different. It didn't smell like eucalyptus anymore. It smelled like bleach and copper. I dropped to the floor and stayed still, listening. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock in the hallway. Nothing else. I went straight for the kitchen island. I crawled underneath it, feeling along the underside of the granite lip. My fingers brushed something small and plastic. I pulled it away. A black USB power bank, held in place with heavy-duty mounting tape. A tiny blue light was blinking on the side. I shoved it into my pocket. Then I headed for the master bedroom. I needed the laptop. If he hadn't taken it to the brewery, it was the only thing that could prove the forgery. I opened the bedroom door. The room was stripped. The bed was gone. The dresser was gone. There was nothing but a stack of cardboard boxes in the center of the room. I walked over to the boxes. The top one was open. Inside were my things, my old yearbooks, my grandmother's jewelry box, a framed photo of us from the day we moved in. The glass shattered. Underneath the photo was a folder, a bright blue, legal-sized folder. I opened it. My heart stopped. It wasn't a power of attorney. It wasn't a second mortgage. It was a life insurance policy, taken out in my name 3 months ago. The beneficiary was Jordan. The premium was being paid out of the same PayPal account he'd used for Kayla's jackets. And there was a note clipped to the front, written in that same neat auditor's hand. Final audit. Liability removal. I heard the front door lock click. The security system beeped once, twice. I forgot my helmet, Kay. Jordan's voice echoed through the empty house. Just stay in the car. I'll be 30 seconds. I looked at the window. I looked at the blue folder. I wasn't a suspicious person anymore. I was a target. My fiancé looked me in the eye and said, I didn't tell you because you always kill the vibe, after I caught him cheating. The blue folder felt like it was humming in my hands, a physical manifestation of every lie he'd told over the last year. I didn't have time to process the insurance policy or the liability removal note. I didn't have time to be a victim. I heard his footsteps on the porch, heavy, confident, the sound of a man who still thought he owned the world. I didn't run for the window. I realized that if I fled now, I'd be running for the rest of my life, waiting for the next manila envelope or the next forged document to land on my doorstep. I stayed in the master bedroom, tucked into the shadow of the walk-in closet, the blue folder clutched against my chest. He walked into the kitchen. I heard the rattle of keys on the counter, the granite I'd picked out, the counter where we used to eat takeout and talk about our future kids. Jordan? Kayla's voice drifted in from the open front door. She sounded impatient, the wellness veneer completely stripped away. Can we go? I don't like being here. It feels heavy. I told you 30 seconds. Jordan snapped back. His voice was different when he talked to her now. The charm was gone, replaced by a jagged, frantic edge. I can't find my helmet. I must have left it in the bedroom. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. I heard him move down the hallway. He stopped at the guest room first, probably checking the boxes he'd packed of my life. Then his footsteps resumed, heading straight for the master. He walked into the room. He didn't turn on the light. The gray twilight of an Austin evening filtered through the blinds, casting long, barred shadows across the floorboards. He stood in the center of the room, looking at the stack of boxes. He sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated self-pity. I'm sorry, Kay, he yelled toward the front of the house. I think she took it. She's literally stealing my gear now. It's pathetic. He turned to leave, but his foot caught on the corner of the box I'd opened. He looked down. He saw the shattered frame of our moving day photo. And then he saw that the blue folder was gone. He froze. I could see his profile in the doorway. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw the mask slip entirely. He wasn't an auditor. He wasn't a cyclist. He was just a small, scared man who had run out of room to move. Jen, he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. I stepped out of the closet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just held up the blue folder. The vibe is dead, Jordan, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, and so is the lie. He didn't move toward me. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just stared at the folder. You shouldn't be here. You're trespassing, Jen. I have a security guard out there. I have cameras. The cameras you bought on our shared account, the ones I have the login for. I took a step toward him. The guard is at the end of the driveway looking at his phone. And Kayla is in the car, wondering why her perfect boyfriend is taking so long to find a helmet. Give me the folder, he said, his voice dropping to a hiss. You don't understand the context. That policy. It was for our future. It was a standard financial move, with a note that says liability removal. You're an auditor, Jordan. You know better than anyone that context is just what you call a lie when it's written down. You weren't planning a future with me. You were planning an exit strategy where you were the only one left standing. Jordan, Kayla called again, her heels clicking on the porch as she finally lost patience and came inside. What is taking so? She stopped in the doorway, her eyes darting between Jordan and me. She looked at the empty room, the shattered photo on the floor, and the folder in my hand. She broke in, Jordan said instantly, his hands coming up in a defensive gesture. Kay, call the guard. She's erratic. I told you she was getting dangerous. I didn't look at him. I looked at Kayla. She was young, she was selfish, and she had helped ruin my life, but she wasn't part of the liability removal plan. She was just the next mark. He's been skimming from your father's firm, Kayla, I said. He's been using your name on the transfers. And this folder? It's a life insurance policy he took out on me without my knowledge. He's not protecting you. He's using you as a shield while he tries to find enough cash to keep himself out of prison. Kayla looked at Jordan. The silence in the room was absolute. Jordan tried to laugh, a dry rattling sound. She's lying, Kay. She's an addict. Remember the email? She's trying to kill the vibe because she can't stand to see us happy. Kayla didn't call the guard. She didn't move toward him. She looked at the shattered photo of a happy couple from from 4 years ago, then back at the man's and standing in the dark. My dad called me 10 minutes ago, Jordan, she said quietly. Her voice was trembling. He told me about the audit. He told me to get my things and leave. I didn't believe him. I thought he was just being controlling. But look at you. You look like a ghost. She turned and walked out of the house. No goodbye. No dramatic exit. Just the sound of her heels fading on the hardwood, followed by the roar of an engine in the driveway. Jordan stood there, his shoulders slumped. The silence of the empty house settled over us like dust. You think you won, he said, his voice flat. But the house is gone, Jen. The bank is taking it. Your credit is trashed. You're left with a studio apartment and a dog that sheds too much. Was it worth it? It's not about winning, Jordan, I said. I walked past him, heading for the front door. It's about the audit. And for the first time in 4 years, the books finally balance. I walked out of the house. I didn't look back at the duplex. I didn't look at the security guard who was finally standing up, looking confused. I got into my car where Brody was waiting, his head resting on the center console. I drove back to my studio. It was small. The walls were thin, and the neighbor's microwave still beeped at 6 a.m. But when I walked inside and locked the door, I didn't push the dresser in front of it. The legal battle took another year. Arthur Sterling kept his word. His lawyers shredded Jordan's forgery claims and traced every cent of the skimmed money back to Jordan's private accounts. Jordan didn't go to jail, but he lost his license, his reputation, and every cent of the equity he'd tried to steal. He moved to a different city, a shadow of the man who once cared about Rafa jackets and expensive mezcal. I sold my half of the equity to a developer. It wasn't the 100,000 I'd dreamed of, but it was enough to put a down payment on a small cottage with a big backyard for Brody, far away from the vibes of the east side. Some nights, I still wake up and think I hear the hum of a recording device in the kitchen. But then I look at the dog snoring at the foot of my bed and the quiet, steady reality of a life that belongs entirely to me. I didn't just survive the audit. I closed the file.